thrilled to have Aly Pain with us, what she said's renowned family conflict expert and professional certified coach. Aly specializes in fostering healthy relationships between parents and teenagers, helping families overcome struggles and thrive together. Today, Aly will enlighten us on a topic that many of us want to know more about. What do our teens actually need to hear from us? So, without further ado, let's welcome Aly Pain. Aly, I'm glad you're
Hi.
back. This
Thanks for having me.
this is an important topic because I think a lot we as parents we wonder what we really should be saying to our teens so that they know they're loved and they're supported and that we are their safe space. So, can you
Yeah,
elaborate on those sort of essential needs of teenagers that parents might not always recognize?
sure. I actually want to take a step backwards for a sec
Sure.
as to because I think as a parent of a teen, we are so we get to a point where I think we get like hyper vigilant about what they're doing and what they're not doing. And it's pretty hard nowadays with, social media and the easy access to substance use and all these things to not start to kind of catastrophize, which is like blowing up a single moment into the future where they're already like a felon and in jail and like, and I know that sounds extreme, but as parents of teens, I think we get caught up in the whole performative, um our kid has to be great at school and they've got to be great at sports and they've got to have great friends and they have to have a social life and they have to be good at home and we've got to make sure they learn all these schools and we get to this point where we get a little obsessive and hyper vigilant about making sure, that's in quotes, making sure that our child is turning out quote right unquote, that I think we forget. We're so worried about making sure that we get our words in and we're the sage advice, and then we turn into lecturing and then they don't listen, but it's so important. We forget, what do they need to hear that's actually more meaningful than more advice and more correction to make sure they're turning out quote right. So I
Yeah.
think that's kind of how we get here.
And as you're saying this, I'm thinking it's so true because when these little bundles come into our lives, we unfold all of our hopes and dreams
Yes.
for their future onto them, hoping that that's the way it will go. But of course, it's not, you can't predict it. And they're their own person. And certainly by the time they become teenagers, they are going to go on the path that they choose, not the one you choose.
Oh, that hello, just deliver the heavy stuff up front, why don't you? I mean, that sentence alone just got me because but I agree with you, and I unfortunately, the another layer of this is, again, this whole performative parenting, which is very real in our world of high achieving, and we have to do all these things. There's also performative parenting because we're so worried about not being a quote good parent, because parent shaming is like an Olympic sport. So whether it's getting emails home from the school about missed classes or the coach or some friend's mom who said your kid was like, it's in on good grief, look at social media, like, I mean, it's everywhere. We're trying to avoid this judgment, and that almost amplifies our need to kind of like, it's a bit, well, I'm gonna just say it, I guess, because I was this too. It's helicopter parenting. It kind of
Mm.
creates this helicopter lawnmower parenting, and I am fully owning I was heading down that path, when my kids were younger, and I had to really look at what I was doing to dial back. And of course, if you're listening to this and you're like, but I have to do that because my child has a learning disability or a physical disability or mental health yes, my son had nothing but challenges, nothing but long and hard challenges as an autistic, ADHD, anxiety, and depressed child. And that didn't get better through the teen years. So I understand that for many parents are like, but I had to. Hmm. And then
Yeah.
I go back to also what you said, Candace, is but the the whole point of the teen years and their adolescent brain development, which is the second largest, second and final in the human lifetime, is about autonomy. And so this, well, however we arrived at the hypervigilance, and again, God bless you if you did, like, because I know it's because you love and care about your child. I have no questions about that at all. And what I'm saying today is, let's have a look at what we're doing and why, because what we are missing is what we're going to talk about, which is what your teen actually needs, which isn't more correction or more encouragement or motivation to get it, quote, right.
Yeah, and I think I need to qualify. I am not an expert on parenting. I have just been humbled by parenting.
Oh, thank you for saying that too. Yes. Yes.
But let's talk about what kids really need to hear. So, what do your
Yeah.
teenagers really need to hear from you on a consistent basis?
Right. Okay. So here's my six things that your teen desperately is wanting to hear and actually needs to hear from you, which means you might need less hypervigilance because this works better. What are they doing right?
Mhm.
I think because we're in this high performance, get it right, you've got to qualify, reach blah blah. We believe that by pointing out where our children could improve, that we're helping them. Because we
Mhm.
want them to know, well, if you just did it this way, or if you just did it this way, like then you get this grade, and then you get that comes across to your teenager as constant nitpicking and criticism, which is
Mhm.
actually scientifically proven a demotivator. So again, I have no questions about your intention. If that is what you're doing for them to improve, you're actually not getting as much of it as you want. You're not getting bang for your buck. So if you want bang for your buck, how about you point out what your teen is doing right? Any little tiny thing that they're doing right. I'm proud of you for that. Thanks for doing XYZ. I really appreciate that you did that. And if you're like, Aly, if my teen just did one thing that I liked, I would let them know. You know what? I totally understand that phase two, where you're like, where did your IQ go? Because it's dropped into your boots. And where's your motivation and lazy, irresponsible? I get that too. We've also proven that it's where we focus. When we're constantly focusing on what you're not doing, our brains cannot and will not ever see what they are doing. So that is step number one. What are they doing right? And take a moment, not big and flowery. Teens don't like big and flowery. Make it brief and short, to acknowledge, simply acknowledge what they are doing. So that's step number one. Step number two is, because their brain is going through a massive renovation that does have them appear as having lost all of their IQ and their motivation and in the enthusiasm for life and ability to communicate with more than one grunt and all of those things. I totally understand. They can't help that. That is a physiological, necessary process for their brains to become developed adults. And I know no one ever told you that. And it's not a very funny joke that no one ever told you they're not doing this on purpose. They are going through a brain renovation that no one told them was going to happen either. And if it happened for adults, there'd be serious drugs for that. So just know what they're doing is hard for them too. And what they want to know, because they can't control it and it's scary for them too, which by the way, it rewrites their entire identity. So, like, no big deal. What they want to know is, do you love me in my mess? I'm a hot mess. I don't know how to drive this. I've never been on this roller coaster and I am terrified. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I like. I don't know why I'm so emotional. I don't know why I'm doing this. And I have no words to explain it to you. Do you love me in this most frightening time that might last 3 to 4 years and there's nothing I can do about, and I have no way of communicate it to you? Do you love me
Mhm.
in my mess? It's a big one, really big. To let them know, oh, you're not doing this on purpose. I'm not digging it. I can't imagine what it's like for you. No one told you this was going to happen. I do love you. This is hard.
As you're sitting there saying this, I'm thinking typically when kids get to teenage years, moms are in menopause, and
Yes.
I got to tell you, you're going through the same damn thing. You can
Yes.
understand what's going on. So, if you could understand it from your own perspective of what's going on as a mother and and as a woman in your body, you can relate to your teen that way as well, I think.
Yes, that is so well said. I call it like it's like the global hormone hijack. It is puberty, perimenopause, and parenting, like all or menopause all at one. And it is so hard. And that's such a great point, Candace, is that if we can give ourselves some compassion and grace for the lack of control we have over our bodies and unfortunately our brains as these drastic hormonal changes happen, we might be able to see our teen with a little bit of grace too and say, I do love you, and this is hard. I don't know how to help you most of the time, but I love you. I love you regardless. So yeah, that's the second one. Um, the third one is to be their cheerleader. Because again, if we're always pointing out where they could improve to just get a little bit better or make that team or get better grades or blah, 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 what we're doing um, is we are reinforcing kind of a pass fail environment that says, well, I'll love you if you just like, just like try a little harder, just like get this grade and get into this and these things that I value and or excuse me, things that I believe make me a good parent. So I need my teen to fulfill, be, do, say, fulfill things so that I feel good about myself, which is unfair because that is projecting my fear and anxiety about who I am and my wholeness on them. Now it's up to them to fulfill that. That is crap. And it is also, it's codependent. That's really not fair. So we want to be their cheerleader because encouragement, which builds self confidence, is a far more powerful internal motivator than criticism or point or correction. Is actually it's not a motivator at all. So we want to be their cheerleader and let them know, like, look, if you're doing your best, but we got to be careful of if you're doing your best because if you're dealing with a child who has mental health concerns like depression, doing their best might be laying in bed all day. And
Mhm.
so we really need to check our expectations um, and let go of this whole fulfilling potential, which is a really big performative thing that you and I were raised in. We need to let go of that and move on. The fourth thing is, do you hear me? Like, can you hear me? So, as I pointed out in number two, do you love me in your hot mess? Your teenager is their brain is dramatically densifying, like hugely, wildly densifying. So to give you just one little example, their neural pathways for every one that we knew and loved, it is being destroyed, not so fun, and 10 more are being put in its place. Their emotional capacity is going from 16 basic emotions, feelings to 87. That is 4.5 times. But unlike your phone, when you plug it in at night and it goes like software update, your teen's brain doesn't do that. They're getting the new hardware, but they don't have the software to use it. And that's on you, which nobody told you either. So even though they are raw and spicy and conflict and blamey, yes, they haven't turned into the spawn of Satan and you have not failed as a parent. They are attempting to their brain is trying to wire this new hardware, but they don't have the software, the intellectual or executive function to effectively express themselves. So rather than getting caught up in what they're saying or how they're saying it, and I do encourage boundaries, not name calling and swearing at you, etc. Okay. But when you shut it down, it's like holding a lid on a boiling pot. That's not going to work. So rather than getting really caught up in how they're communicating it, listen to what they're saying. Are they sad? Are they angry? Are they frustrated? Are they feeling humiliated, embarrassed? Help them put emotional language around what you're seeing and hearing because science can show that when our brain can articulate our feelings, it is the number one antidote to most temporary mental health situations, not like pathological wiring, but mental health. When we can articulate we can effectively process, then we can heal and release them. But it all comes down to articulating. So, um, empathy is critical. Not fixing. You are not your job is not to cheerlead them such that you fix them up and they never have discomfort and they don't, that doesn't make you a good parent. So stop. Just stop it right now. What makes you a great parent is equipping and empowering them to have the full human spectrum of emotions, not just the happy, sparkly, shiny kind. No, all of the emotions and not fix it because their brain has to express it before their executive function, which isn't fully formed, can begin to process it. It's not up for you to process it for them. That actually disables the executive function from fully developing. So hear them in their emotional mess rather than focusing on how they're communicating it or coming at you with boundaries. Yes, of course, with boundaries.
Before you jump to number 5, I have to say, as you were sitting there describing what's happening in their brains as they're developing, I couldn't help but think of that movie Inside Out from Disney.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
it was just you just nailed it. That's exactly what is going on in their brains. They're just exploding with growth, new pathways, new experiences, and ways of thinking. So it is hard to keep up with, for sure.
It is, and I love that you brought that up because that movie, which we all thought was like a really fun cartoon, it is an actual animated illustration of what happens in their adolescent brain. So if you haven't watched Disney Pixar's Inside Out, definitely go do that and watch it with your teen if you want. Okay, number 5 is when is it my turn to talk? Oh, everyone, if you're a talking parent, raise your hand. I am a talker. This was hard for me because especially with my autistic son, he is an introvert, so he uses less words. But there wasn't room for him to use his words because you see, I was always lecturing or filling in the space or helping him or supporting or encouraging, blah, 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 blah. Thank goodness I do this for work. So I needed to learn that what the adolescent brain needs most is listening, not lecturing. And when there isn't word space for your teen, I call it an invitation of silence. And I don't mean stonewall them. I don't mean just stop talking to your teen. But when you just use less words, you create an invitation of silence that allows space for them to come in and fill. And I'm not saying they're going to be a chatty Cathy. Some kids are, some kids aren't. Giving them time to talk where you do not interrupt, fix, correct, judge, even asking curious questions because you want to let them know you're present and you relate can take their very precarious train off the track and they can't get back on the track to continue that path that they were on. So when they start talking, which they will when you create this invitation and just start using less words, ask if you're not sure. Are you looking for me to just listen or would you like my input? And they might not even know the answer to that. So default to listening first. And then before you do not interrupt, count to 5. Most teenagers will continue to talk if you just allow the pause. The pause is magic. Okay. So when is it my turn to talk is critical. Use less words, go from lecturing to listening. Lecturing worked when they were a child. They were absorbing, absorbing, absorbing. Now they're going into autonomy, which is an outward, not an absorbing, it's an outward thing. So less words.
I feel
And
like
number
we need a
6.
drum. I feel like we need a drum roll into
Yeah,
this last one.
ready?
But okay, here we
Okay.
go. Next one.
This one is tough, which is kind of built on it, is I need to be different than you. I need to be different. The adolescent brain development includes 2 simultaneous psychological processes. One is differentiation, which is the entire purpose for them to figure out how they are different than you for the purpose of survival. If you've ever watched Discovery Channel or National Geographic and Cubs, it's the same. It's just human. The second is individuation, which is who am I? Like literally, who am I? Because remember, I said in the beginning that their entire identity is being rewritten. Who am I as a more complex brain and developing now into adult? What are my beliefs? What are my values? what do I say when I'm upset? What do it's not what and then a differentiation at the same time, which is they're actually supposed to push against every single thing you've ever taught them, where you're like, "Say, okay, that's not the values we raised you in." That's their entire job. Not allowing them to be different than you sends a message that you don't love them if they aren't the same. And what ends up happening below the surface here, because sameness is safe. Our brains love sameness. When I say I like you, what I'm saying is we are like. Difference is it is concerning. Difference is uncomfortable. Difference is scary. So we don't like difference. We want to shut differences down. Oh, that trait's from Uncle John. We are our family. Oh, that's from Aunt Mary. We don't like, you will not be. Actually, they will be. And when you can acknowledge that they're in whole point of this brain development, which they cannot control and stop, is to be different than you and figure out who the heck they are. And you love them in that process, even when they have different values than you, which can be challenging. So you stay curious and compassionate about that. What they experience with you is true belonging rather than needing to go and seek the counterfeit version, which is fitting in with perhaps unsavory relationships or crowds where they feel like they are welcome. So let them be different from you. That's number 6.
All right. Incredible. Allie, as usual, these are all great, great points. My head was spinning as you were talking, of course, reliving all of those teen experience with my own girls. But I think maybe we'll end this with just maybe a positive note is, they come back to you and they
They
come back these
do.
wonderful, wonderful people. And I think
Yes.
something my daughter said to me, which I thought was so profound and so sweet, was, we were talking about, sort of those rough years we went through and a time where I was maybe not perfect and I, didn't nail it. And she said, "It's okay, Mom. You're going through this
Oh,
for the first time too."
oh, isn't that
Right.
lovely?
And it's true because, we're not going to get it perfect. This is our first trip
No.
through the teen years with our
Yes.
teens.
And your child didn't come with a manual, and no one told you these
Yeah.
teen years were going to happen. And they don't have to be awful, but they can be challenging. And absolutely, mine are 20 and 22, and they are the most incredible human beings that I am privileged to have amazing relationships with. So please don't aim for perfect. We don't, that's not a game we play. Nope, nope,
Yep.
nope, no perfect parenting here. We do hot, messy, um, and compassionate and curious, both with yourself and your team.
Perfect. I'm going to put the link to your website in this video. And Allie,
Okay,
thanks so much for joining me today.
thank you.